Good morning and welcome to this webinar, Our Streets Let's Talk, hosted by Athlone Chamber of Commerce in association with Athlone Town Centre Shopping Centre. My name is Tig Carey. I'm editor of the Westmeath Independent newspaper, and I'll be chairing this proceedings today. Thank you for those of you who are joining us watching this live. This stream will also be available for subsequent viewing. It's being recorded and will be on the Athlone Chamber of Commerce YouTube channel later. As I said, this is part of a series of webinars on the topic, Our Streets Let's Talk. The initial webinar prior to Christmas dealt with Church Street, Northgate Street, and that particular area. This webinar deals with the west side of Athlone, and in particular, Main Street, Bastion Street, Pearse Street, Castle Street, Connaught Street, O'Connell Street, and Market Square. Again, I'd like to welcome all attendees who are watching this live. You're invited to submit your questions via the Q&A facility at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please note that questions via the chat may not be seen, and we would recommend that you submit them through the Q&A function. We will endeavour to deal with as many of those questions as possible throughout the seminar. And so without further ado, I'm joined today by a panel of six experts in the area. And I'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves to you, starting with Gerald O'brien.
Good morning, all. My name is Gerald O'brien. I'm a local historian and author. I have lived all my life in Athlone. I've lived on both sides of the town, so I'm very familiar with both the Connaught side and the Leinster side. And I've written extensively about the Connaught side and have a particular love for it. So I'm looking forward to our discussion this morning.
Thank you, Gerald. And now to Anya Daly.
Thanks, Tig. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anya Daly. I am the president for TUS Students' Union, representing the 4 counties. I am the previous president of AIT Students' Union, and I've been here in Athlone for 8 years. Came here in 2014 as a student, and 4 years later as a student representative.
Thank you, Anya. Now, Catalyst Harton.
Thank you, Tig, and welcome everyone. My name is Catalyst Harton. I'm the senior planner in Westmeath County Council. I have a number of years experience in the Irish public sector, working at local and regional level, and I've worked across a wide range of local authorities before moving here to Westmeath. I'm responsible for all functions of the planning department, which includes planning for future growth and employment, and I'm a member of the Westmeath Regeneration Advisory Group. I've got an interest in strategic planning and the formation of strategies, so ensuring that the right development happens in the right place and at the right time for the benefit of the communities and the economy. These strategies are very important in identifying what development is needed and where, with a focus on roles that social, economic, environmental and cultural development play in creating an attractive place. So through today's webinar, I'm looking forward to engaging with our stakeholders and getting an understanding of their needs and visions. These are very important in informing our future planning strategies for Athlone, and in particular, the upcoming urban area plan, which will be prepared jointly with Roscommon County Council, and it's commencing later this year.
Thank you, Catalyst. And now to you, Alan Shaw.
Good morning, everyone. Alan Shaw is my name. I'm president of Athlone Chamber of Commerce. My first introduction to Athlone was back in 1991 when I joined the then Athlone RTC, and I studied accountancy. Later going on then to work with Russell Brennan Keane, where I finished my apprenticeship and continued on there to becoming director of the SME sector. I was with RBK for about 20 years, and more recently then I joined a family business, Shaw Commercials, and as I say, I'm now currently president of Athlone Chamber of Commerce since July 2020. So I'm really looking forward to this morning's discussion and giving us an opportunity to talk about our streets in Athlone and what the future might hold. So really looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan. Our next panelist is Tracy Coggle.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Coggle, and we have a general practice estate agency in Athlone. It's run by myself and my brother Andy Coggle. I suppose we're interested in this because we're located on O'Connell Street in Athlone, right at the junction there of Connaught Street, Pearse Street, O'Connell Street. So I'm highly interested and would definitely look forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Trasa. And over to Michelle McEwen-Bennett.
Hi, everybody. Michelle McCumbinett, Dean of Faculty of Business and Hospitality here in Toos, Midlands, Midwest, Athlone. I'm a Midlands girl. I'm originally from Clara in County Offaly, but be very familiar with Athlone over the years. While I moved away for a while, I moved back here in 2019 to join AIT. And, you know, I'm very much interested in the development of this town, even into a state, I suppose, or a vision for a university city. Okay, I think that we have great opportunities, not just on the university city style, but also tourism, recreation, and the whole purpose of, you know, balanced lifestyle in the town.
Thank you, Michelle. That's our panel for today's discussion. The purpose of these seminars is to kickstart a conversation to get public engagement about where our town is going and where our particular streets are going. And we look forward to your engagement throughout this webinar. Let's start the proceedings. I think first of all, it would be useful to get an overview of the historic development of the streets in question, what strengths those streets had in the past, how they've evolved. So I'll ask Gerald, our historian, to maybe talk us through the historic development of the streets that we're discussing today.
Okay, I suppose in a nutshell, a lot of the smaller streets around the Connaught side, I'd be thinking about Castle Street, Barrack Street, to a lesser extent Pearse Street, and certainly Main Street and High Street and Bastion Street. All those streets, they radiated out from the castle in medieval times. So it was kind of a natural progression there. I mean, the Anglo-Normans, when they founded the town, put a long straight street in Church Street, but the Connaught side grew up kind of organically, and Connaught Street, I think, came a little bit later. Now, if we just even turn the clock back 50 years ago, Connaught Street, the Connaught side of the town, was bustling with business. People on the Connaught side rarely had to cross over the town. I mean, everything that you could want. There was a variety of clothes shops for all ages, a shoe shop, greengrocers, cobblers, pubs, hardware shops, bakeries, newsagents, china and delft shops, photographers, doctors, solicitors. You had the shops mainly, in a lot of the shops in Connaught Street. You had Pearse Street, I suppose, was a little bit akin to Garden Vale in that you had mainly the professionals. You had solicitors, doctors, dentists on that side of town. But they had everything on the Connaught side, up to and including undertakers to bury them. And they still have undertakers at the top of Connaught Street. And as I say, people from that side of the town seldom, if ever, had to cross over the town bridge. So they were very much self-sufficient. And I mean, it's obvious today that has changed radically for reasons which we all know, the way that town developed. So I suppose we have to think now about what can be done to revitalise the Connaught side of Athlone. And I look forward to hearing the views.
Thank you, Gerald, for that overview. Moving swiftly from the past, I suppose, to the present, Trasa, I might ask you, as both a business person on this side of town and also somebody who's working in the property industry, if you could outline to us the commercial landscape as it is at present in the streets that we're talking about. What sectors are strong, what sectors are weak, where is the demand, and I suppose how has it changed from what Gerald has described in the past?
Well, I suppose at the moment on these streets, we have a lot of like financial services, insurance brokers, the solicitors, there's ourselves and other property service providers on the streets as well. And that seems to be the way I'd say it's going to continue. I can't really see a huge amount of larger retail units coming to these streets because we don't have the footfall. But there's definitely potential for more offices, more small to medium sized offices, maybe 1 to 5 or 8 employees. So if they were incentivized to come to these streets, it's actually a great place to work. We're on where we are, Connaught Street for over 6 years, nearly 6.5 years now, and it's our favorite location. We're 16 years in business, and we've been in 3 different offices, and we were moved on because landlords were selling. But we've definitely have roots here now in the west side of Athlone, and we love it. And I think more and more people, once they get the opportunity to come to Athlone and are offered good quality office space and good quality accommodation, they'll come and they'll enjoy it. And if there was incentives, you know, for these employees and workers, whether it be, you know, reduced parking permits or, you know, to do with rates or whatever, I think it's the way to go. And I think that's, you know, be the best for the streets on the west side of the town.
Thank you, Tressa. Cataldas, as the senior planner for the local authority in the area, you might outline to us and to our audience the planning tools that you have at your disposal, in particular in the creation of you know, a distinct quarter of the town. You know, what tools, what functions can you use to define a particular area of the town as distinct from the rest of the town?
Thank you, Tig. I suppose there's two key tools available to us as a planning authority. You've got the development management process, which is the consideration of your day-to-day planning applications, and they obviously have a bearing on, you know, what development you see occurring on the ground, whether that be the office, retail, or residential development, just that we've been speaking about. But I suppose those applications are considered in line with the policy that's laid down through your various town master, in the case of Athlone urban area plans. And I suppose these plans need to consider a broad range of perspectives, and you know, they try to shape the character of the different areas. What we do in that regard is we take a strategic approach by looking to see how we can use existing buildings, unused land for development, and how we could bring back vibrancy to the town, whether through residential occupancy, new experiential uses, expanded services, particularly the Connaught Street area and this west side, you know, the tourism and amenity infrastructure with a focus on compact growth. So today's webinar will be very useful in getting feedback on people's own visions for their areas and the different parts of the town that I suppose that they have a keen interest in. What I would say is, again, from that high level perspective, it's very important for us at the outset that we look at how the town functions as one entity, as opposed to starting off with the individual streets. Then the next step is seeing what opportunities are available on these streets that we spoke about earlier, you know, the likes of Connaught Street, Pearse Street, Connaught Street, Castle, Bastion Street and the surrounding areas. And then we identify the opportunities that are available here. This obviously feeds into that clear vision that we identified for the entire town. And we look then to build consensus through public consultation with everyone. But I suppose in terms of attractive areas and looking at the character of specific areas, you know, that requires a combination of factors to effectively, I suppose, create somewhere that's attractive. So we're looking at constraints and opportunities. So there may be issues with utilities, services, environment, connectivity, access, pedestrian movement, public transport, the relationship with the car in the wider area. And really what we're looking at is for potential, you know, so how can we look at this area and how can we urbanize and activate the streets? Can we bring in a new housing offer? Is there mixed use development? What scale is it appropriate at? Tracy just touched on the retail versus the office and maybe the need for flexible uses and sustainable life choices and creating, I suppose, greens places and spaces. So enhancing that natural amenity. We have the Shannon on the doorstep of the town, but perhaps people, when they're coming down to use the castle, aren't moving into that wider area. And I suppose just personally, I think it's important for the area that we're speaking about today from an attractiveness perspective, that there's enhanced access to the river, you know, that there's green spaces to enjoy in this area and recreational functions. And we need to get people to move beyond where they are and to explore the west side. You know, we have to change the perception of the area, make it more friendly in terms of mobility, and more attractive for people to get from the castle. And people are coming down here, and that there's more that could be done perhaps by providing additional amenities in this area. So, for example, there's potential to look at the canal. It's running north to south. and some areas are in poor condition. So we could investigate how we could bring a focus up to the north end there at Ranelagh, the #1 gun battery, and Gerald will probably give you a much better historical overview of its significance to Athlone. But it's obviously an attraction that's there and it can be built upon as a focus. So perhaps there's potential for a park in this area. Then to the south at the Meadows, you know, you've got your walking and fishing stands, but it doesn't come back up to the bank of the Shannon. So there's potential to tie into Bastion Quay here. So really the tools that we're using to these strategies, we want to look at ways to create links back to the main street, you know, the castle and the Golden Mile, and link it up through the middle of Connaught Street. So that people can come and see the character of the area and then stimulate more activity here, you know, bring it back to life. There's also scope through these strategies to look at the potential of brownfield and backlands to deliver maybe squares, green spaces, pocket parks, shared spaces, and so forth. And again, that you know, vision for the creation of an attractive, safe environment for people to use, spend time, and enjoy the area. And then obviously, so not all of those areas you would put forward for these uses. You'd also look at areas that have the potential, I suppose, where you could assemble sites and deliver, you know, that economic function that's also very important. Economic, whether that be through crafts, tourism activities, office, retail, cafes, you know, the wide variety of areas. And I suppose bringing back that vibrancy at nighttime to you know, to bring a presence there as well. So that's a brief overview of the type of tools that we use and the approach that we take to looking at distinct areas and identifying their characters and potential, I suppose.
Thank you, Cathal. That's a lot to pick through there for our panelists later on. Michelle, taking, I suppose, extending on from what Catalyst has just said there, in relation to the development of an area of character, a distinct identity for a particular geographic quarter of the town, can you outline to us maybe elsewhere in the world where that has been successfully achieved, what policies they've used, what incentives can be deployed, and how you, as an expert in the field of business and hospitality, see that can be done?
Yeah, so, you know, going back to what Cathal just said there, you know, the successes of towns don't rely just on the you know, the back office business. It relies on footfall, it relies on economic exchange, it relies on you know, the types of industry or the types of service that are, I suppose, collectively brought together and attracts people. And one of the big things that we would be trying to encourage is looking at benchmarking, such as, for example, Edinburgh. So Edinburgh is a very famous European student-based university city. Okay, and what they have done is they have advertised themselves as a learning hub, but also a social and experiential learning hub. So in other words, not only do you come for your education, where we're going to guarantee you a good lifestyle, but we're also going to guarantee you jobs at the end of it. So it is bringing those three core pillars of success into Athlone and using that kind of Athlone destination Athlone brand to say we are a university town, we are going to be a university city, we are in the centre of Ireland, and we connect to Galway, we connect to Dublin, we connect to Limerick, we connect to Sligo, you know, we connect to Northern Ireland, and that we are a hub of learning, we're a hub of education, we're a hub of social and community I suppose interaction, and we're a hub of employment. And one of the big things that we have to start looking at is, right, well, what is Athlone under that brand going to look like? And designating, such as even New York, all right, and we're not New York, but the thing is that size is not necessarily the issue here, it's identity. And if we're able to say, well, we're going to have various different sectors, that during the week we have the financial or business sector, where you have, as Tracy has said, that kind of back office, or even the office space where business and small to medium enterprises are supported, where they're doing maybe their online service provision. Then you also have then your your high street, okay, sector part of the town. Then you have your community base. Maybe there's the arts, where you have cultural district, okay, and that each one of them then work together, and you use a branding kind of approach, whereby each sector, each district hosts a particular activity at a particular time of the week, so that you'll always have, say, the weekends, you're encouraging people, come to the art district, you'll have your cafes, you'll have your outdoor dining, you'll have all of the supports that you need there. Your children are going to have entertainment, and then during the week, then, you know, you have people that are coming to a particular district, like, as I said, the financial district, where again you have that daytime kind of supports from a consumer perspective of lunches and all of that, but you have space for people to interact, to bring clients, all of that, and supported by that then is an actual infrastructure on transport, and whether that be, you know, looking at a park and ride service, looking at redesignation part of the streets near the Shannon as, you know, pedestrianised areas only. All right, where little stalls set up at the weekends or during the day. I mean, there are, even in Ireland, there's huge examples in Cork. You know, you have the English market area. It's all enclosed, but that is packed, all right, with various different crafts. People are producing their own produce and selling it there. So it's using those examples, all right, and using even the success of tidy towns idea, whereby everyone decides, yes, in this sector, we're all going to agree as owners of, or as occupiers of a particular space, that we're going to agree that our outdoors are going to be, you know, presented in a particular way, that we as a group are going to come together and we're going to market our district in a particular way. When you do that, you have people responding, and you will get success, and you will get employment, and you will get you know, an economy, a social and community economy building, and it'll be sustainable. And that is the most important thing, it's sustainability.
Thank you, Michelle. Speaking of Athlone as a university town and possibly university city, Anya, could I ask you what it is that students would like to see in the streets that we're referring to here today?
I think the biggest thing really is accommodation. I think the provision in Athlone just doesn't exist anymore, and even in regards to even professionals and industry and all that, the accommodation just doesn't exist. You can have one look on daft.ie and there's about 4 properties on it, and especially this side of town, students and professionals would love to live there, but the properties that are available are completely out of the market. People couldn't afford them. But just to echo what Michelle was saying in regards to the pedestrian, getting rid of transport on making it pedestrianised. I think that's an excellent idea. I think it allows culture to grow, and I'd hope in the future it kind of would mirror kind of Galway, a shop street, that kind of side of town. But I think personally, to get rid of cars and actually bring in trams, I think what would be a really kind of exciting strategy for Athlone is to bring in trams and to actually make free 24-hour transport actually around it, because it is very accessible, and there is beautiful parts of Athlone to kind of explore for students. And even on the back of that, we are part of a European university called Run, so it's kind of building on that kind of cultural identity of Athlone and of Ireland, and kind of making it stand out for students that they want to actually come here.
Thank you. At this stage in the webinar, what I'm trying to tease out, I suppose, is a kind of a general overview, and we'll get to more specifics as we progress. But to conclude the general overview section, Alan, as President of Athlone Chamber of Commerce, can you give us an insight into what your members who are based on the west side of town are feeling, what their attitude is towards the current situation on the west side, and what they would like to see develop?
Yeah, thanks, Tig. So yeah, like if we look at the various streets that we've have on our agenda this morning, they are very contrasting in terms of how successful they have been and what they have to offer. If on the one hand we look at Connaught Street itself, from a business community perspective, there is very much a feeling that we've been let down. The west side has been neglected over many years, and there's a yearning to bring Connaught Street back to its former glory of many years ago. But we have to be realistic. If we look at Connaught Street on its own, we have to look at it within the context of the wider town now. Athlone has evolved over the last 30 years. It has changed. And Connaught Street is going to be a very different street in the future. But I think it's going to be a lot better as a result of it, because I think we have, a wide skill set available to us now, both at Westmeath County Council level and among the wider community. And we've a great opportunity now to start engaging in a consultation process and taking ownership of it among all of the stakeholders. And this is a beginning. It's the start of it. I know our elected members in the council are already, looking at these and seeking new plans and so on. I think if you look at the other streets, which, as I say, are in stark contrast, the likes of Main Street, Market Square, Castle Street, and so on, and Bastion Street, this is a fabulous space, and it's one that's going to become much more into focus, I think, in the next very short time, because the Trans-European Greenway, we're going to see a new footbridge, cycle bridge being constructed in the next 12 to 15 months. And we're going to see an escalation in footfall around the Main Street, Market Square area, where we have a fabulous site with a castle on the one side and a beautiful church on the other side. And this area needs to be, we need to remove the cars, remove the parking spaces, and provide for them elsewhere in a suitable location. That's a planning question, but and we need to create plaza spaces so that when our footfall arrives, the increased levels of footfall and tourism, that we have something for them to stay for. So, outdoor dining facilities, art and tourism attractions, and, the shop fronts too, and the beautiful colours that we see in the Main Street area at the moment draws people up to Bastion Street. And then when they go beyond that, then and enter into O'Connell Street and Connaught Street, invariably they turn back. There's nothing further for them to see there at the moment. So these are all things that we need to consider, I think, in the planning phase that we're in now for the future, to put ourselves into the shoes of those tourists to a certain extent. And then in looking at the bigger picture for our own people, then in terms of building accommodation and over the shop fronts on the main streets, that we consider the facilities that we have then to grow and build families and bring that vibrancy back into Connaught Street and the surrounding areas. So that's kind of my overview of this, but I think we're moving in the right direction. There's a lot of hope, there's a lot of passion around this morning in this webinar, and I think we need to grasp this and use it in a positive way to move forward. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. As I said, let's get let's get into the specifics. The Westmeath County Council has envisaged this side of the west side of Athlone as the tourism and cultural quarter. Is that enough? Is there room for a service provision, for retail provision? One of the questions from our attendees, and again, I just remind people to submit the questions via the Q&A function. One of the questions this morning relates to what we're discussing. It says that while service retail is growing in this area of town because it doesn't rely on footfall as people make appointments typically, this is too narrow and footfall needs to be improved. So what simple measure can be introduced to improve footfall from the panel's perspective? So I'd like to throw that out as an open question to you all. What's the mix of uses for the streets we're talking about, and how can we increase footfall to those streets? Who would like to take that on?
Thank Tig. I suppose this is something that we're actively looking at the moment. So we have Turley architects commissioned to look at a strategy that really can redress, I suppose, that decline that we've been speaking about in this west side, looking at the history of the area and what we can do in terms of bringing back that I suppose vibrancy. So looking at areas such as the public realm, place making, that visioning that we spoke about earlier, looking at urban design principles, and again I talked about the opportunities that lie in these backlands. So looking at a strategy for the backland areas and how we can use them for either amenity or development purposes. So as you rightly pointed out, there is a focus on the emerging status of the area as a tourism and cultural quarter, and how we can build on this, because we have some super assets there. We've got Athlone Castle, the Luan, Sean's Bar, and that traditional old town streetscapes that have seen the emergence of a number of bars and restaurants. So the work we're doing is looking at how we can positively respond to and build on this profile, how we can use urban design and architecture to reimagine the area, how we can see, again, as was touched upon earlier by Michelle, how we can look on the distinctive role and context for this area within the wider context of the town, and that connectivity that I spoke about earlier in terms of the amenity potential, the need to link back into our assets, into the canal, into our walkways, bringing people up Connaught Street, for example, and then set a benchmark for public realm and town centre design. And again, how can we build on this, the potential of the Shannon and the relationship of the streetscapes, and how we can design in order to promote, I suppose, equality and attractiveness in the area. And I suppose one of the areas we're looking at in line with the vision of the cultural and tourism quarter, there are, even at this early stage, and I suppose, it is only an early stage, we've looked at places that have the potential for improved public realm. And I suppose an example is how we can tie all the other funds together, and everything has to be, as part of a wider plan, and how we can leverage funding to achieve an overall goal. So just there at Market Place beside Athlone Castle. So as we all know, construction is commencing the pedestrian cycle bridge across the Shannon. We've got the recently completed public realm enhancements. Falch Ireland and the OPW are delivering projects associated with Athlone Castle and enhancing the attractiveness and ease of accessibility to that area. And there's a clear opportunity to build on all this work by delivering further regeneration work at Marketplace, there beside just the diamond beside Athlone Castle. It's the main tourist area, and I think Alan alluded to it there. There's a real poor sense of arrival to the castle. It's dominated by that surface car parking. It's predicated on an outdated town centre road layout, which is really focused on facilitating traffic movement through the town as quickly as possible. So there's a great opportunity for pedestrian-friendly public realm enhancements to the creation of a public space there, with the provision of maybe planting and seating. Just the introduction of spaces that create a safe and attractive environment for people to relax and enjoy, and allow and use that area at their leisure. There's also, I suppose, we then need to look at the relationship between that area and the castle and St. Paul's there. It's quite closed off in terms of its access to the public. I suppose the cathedral in Longford is a very good example of how they brought the grandeur of the cathedral down onto the street and opened it up for people to enjoy. So these are the type of things from that perspective that we would be looking at in terms of the ability to stimulate the area, to bring increase the attractiveness, bring more footfall. But I suppose it's important to remember as well that this would only be one element of it. Regeneration, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a long-term project, and regeneration often happens incrementally. So what we would do is look to stimulate, I suppose, confidence in this area. And then, it's reliant on other stakeholders, traders, the people living there, investors, to show their confidence and build upon that. So, our plans, while, important, are only one piece of the jigsaw. But that's just a brief example, a brief example of something that could be done, I suppose, to increase the attractiveness and bring people to that area, and get more footfall flowing through, and hopefully stimulate and support the businesses and revitalize the area.
Thank you, Cataldas. While it's clear that the existence of the Lewin Gallery, Athlone Castle, the river, and so forth provides a platform for a tourism-led approach, it would seem that approach would be focused mainly on the Main Street, Bastion Street, Castle Street area. As mentioned by some of the panelists here, there's a division between that area and the Connaught Street and Pearse Street area. Connaught Street currently has a high level of vacancies, a high level of dereliction, and whether tourism and culture in itself can create a vibrant future for Connaught Street itself is questionable. And I think, Gerald, you have some ideas as to what other uses could be made for some of the vacant units in Connaught Street and Pearse Street to complement a tourism approach.
Yeah, well, I suppose we're looking at the reality that retail isn't really the best option or the most obvious option at the moment. But I also think that, I mean, I like the idea Michelle mentioned, the covered markets, the market in Cork, and that Athlone has been a market town for 600 or 700 years. There's a tradition there, and it was the Connaught side. So again, the whole idea of if you were to develop an indoor market, Connaught side might be ideal for it. I think there might be a need for a think tank outside the council. And I'm not putting it all back on the council, but a think tank to look at the things that are missing from Athlone and to consider how best they could be attracted in. Athlone also had a long tradition of distilleries and breweries. We have one micro brewery in the town, but we have no distillery. And there are distilleries popping up all over the country. The other area, I was listening to the radio quite recently, and there was a discussion about getting shoes repaired in the Midlands and people having to travel. Somebody had to travel 60 kilometers to get a pair of leather boots repaired. I just think that there's a lot of things that we don't repair at the moment that could be repaired, and small units are ideal for that kind of thing. So possibly around Connaught Street, you could have, place to repair not only shoes, but all kinds of things. We're becoming more eco-friendly, and the whole benefit thing of recycling and that. So that's one thing. I also thought that I mentioned in my thoughts that the idea of an auction house in Athlone, we're not within 50 kilometers of an auction house, and yet we have the best public transport links. The three nearest to us, I think, are Burr, Rossgrey and Oldcastle, and they're anywhere between 50 and 80 kilometers away. I think that could attract people into the town if there were regular auctions in an auction house. It is something that people would be interested in. But one of the big things that is a little bugbear of mine is the position of the tourist office. We're talking about a tourism quarter and all the rest. The tourist office is up in the castle, where it's not the most accessible building. When the tourist office was temporarily housed in the market square in a large mobile home type unit, it was thronged with people, because people come into town and they want something, they want information quickly. And if the castle is would sound like an ideal area for it, but it's not great for people with disabilities and that trying to get to the castle. Whereas if that was in a place in the castle street or whatever, it would still serve the same purpose, and it would free up a little bit of room in the castle for some other attraction possibly. So I think there's a need maybe for thinking outside the box as to what is needed, and then how could they be brought in. But they're just a few thoughts I would have on it.
Thank you, Gerard. Trasa, if I could excuse me, if I could come to you in relation to the infrastructure at present on the west side of Athlone. There's a feeling amongst the business community and residents that it's inferior to that of the east side of Athlone, and that a lot of work needs to be done in maintaining the streets visually and so forth. As a business owner in the street, what's your feelings on that?
Yeah, I think Connaught Street in particular and O'Connell Street, I think we need action urgently. I don't think there's really time for, think tanks and whatnot. It's more from a day-to-day point of view. The footpaths are in complete disrepair. There's no bins. We had bins on the street when we were opened up first 6 years ago on O'Connell Street. The bins were taken away a couple of years ago. Now I know we have the new car park there in O'Connell Street, but it's beginning to get into disrepair, and instead of it being repaired, there was a fence put around it. You know, I just feel if this had happened on the other side of town, say the likes of the Fair Green or one of these places, it would have been attended to straight away and repaired. Like our paths outside the office, like kids fell coming from school. We had 2 falls within a week, and we reported to the council. The council were over straight away, but filled it with tarmac. You know, a concrete park or concrete footpath filled with tarmac, and it was done about 2 years ago, and nobody came back to repair. So I just think we don't get the same response at all as the east side of town. And I suppose I don't want to get into a tit for tat, but going forward, if the response could be quicker, and if we could get the same enthusiasm that is put into the east side of town, put into the west side of town, because we have the buildings, we have the people, there's great local people over this side of town, there's great businesses, we're all doing quite well, you know, and it's just to encourage more people to come over this side of town. That's all we need. And for them to come over, they need a nice place to shop, to walk, to have their cup of coffee. So I think just to get the focus on the west side of town, that it is a good place, and take the negativity away that, you know, Connaught Street just in the media and that it can have a bad name, but it's actually a great place to work and to live.
Thank you, Tressa. And 2 questions that arise, I suppose, in relation to what you just said. One says that the west side of town around Castle Street, Main Street and Bastion Street is known as Little Temple Bar. It's of great benefit to the area. It's a great start. But as you go further up the street, signs of derelictions begin to appear.
Yeah.
Buildings in poor condition, boarded up, litter and dog feces. Also,
that's true. That's true.
Sorry, Tressa, yes.
Yeah, sorry to cut across you there. And one thing where I sit on my desk, I don't know if you know where our office is, but I sit at the front of our building there in O'Connell Street. I see the tourists, especially, you know, say come March right up to October, they walk past their office and within 10 seconds, they've turned back around again. So they've nothing to entice them up the street. If anything, it's not a nice place to be because of all the derelict buildings. Now, I know the council acquired a few buildings up the street, but I just wonder when they're going to be redeveloped and what's the plan.
Thank you. Cataldas, one of the questions that has also come in from our attendees is it possible for the Urban Council to implement standards for shop fronts and business exteriors, which eliminate plastic neon sign type exteriors? As well as that, you might just address the general upkeep and maintenance, and also the plans for the buildings on Connaught Street that were compulsorily acquired that Tressa just referred to.
Thanks, Tyga. And I suppose, in short, yes, it is possible to introduce policy in terms of shopfront designs, and you know, our urban area plan will look at that area, will look at the character of the streetscape, and it will set out standards for which planning applications for any new development will be assessed against. So in short, yes, there is and there will be policy in place in terms of shopfront, and there is currently policy in place, but that will be reviewed and enhanced. And again, I think we're all on the same page in terms of the need to enhance the attractiveness of this area and the streets. And again, that is that's the exercise we're undertaking at the moment. We're looking at it from a number of different perspectives, as I've outlined earlier. And I suppose one of them, the key areas, is viability. So we need to get an understanding of that the plans that we have for these areas, that they're deliverable and that they're achievable. And I suppose some of them may be achievable short, medium or longer term. And that's the kind of strategic overview that we'll be taking. And that's the case, I suppose, the approach that we've took to those properties at the end of that we've purchased. And the idea in us taking those on is obviously to improve the attractiveness of the area, but to do somewhat of a site assembly individually, individual properties are not overly attractive to the private market in terms of a prospective purchaser, but we hope to free them up. You know, we've created a more attractive lot for the private developer, and we'll be de-risking and developing a case for what's needed. So we'll bring in our own market expertise and, I suppose, marketing expertise, so that we can bring them on to the market and hopefully get a prospective purchase for them. And then again, with the idea of curing that dereliction and creating a catalyst for renewed growth and change up there. So we will be examining and appraising all the development opportunities available, and then we'll be looking to, if there's funding available in that area, to avail of those opportunities, you know, through. So really what we're trying to do is add value to them, make them more attractive, and then identify the uses that could go in there. And I suppose some supporting work we're doing in that area is we're carrying out a social infrastructure audit. So hopefully that will identify if there's any specific potential for uses that aren't being catered for at the moment. And again, the need for flexibility, and as some of the commentators are saying there, the need for public input to let people have their say in terms of what they identify as their needs for the area.
Thank you, Cataldas. Michelle and Anya, I might refer this question to you both. The largest potential opportunity site on this side of town is the Army Barracks. It links the Golden Mile to the medieval quarter. It would make a fantastic campus for TUS, for example. Could the barracks be relocated to a modern development in a peripheral site? Now, in the absence of a Defence Forces representative, I might turn that question around and ask you guys, could TUS be relocated to the barracks?
Okay, I'll take this first, Anya, if that's all right. Okay, so we are working very, very closely with the Westmeath County Council and Athlone Chamber in relation to looking at a central presence of TUS from a perspective of innovation, entrepreneurship, even nurturing of small to medium enterprise, even you know, a walk-in centre where people with an idea can be advised and supported to actually start their own business, for example. So we are looking at that, and we have been successful in small funding applications, and we are, as I said, working towards other funding opportunities that will allow us to integrate more within the community. And so I suppose, Tyke, what I'm saying is, yes, we are looking already at that, and I suppose actively engaging it. As Anya said, we're now a European university as well. We're the only European university outside Trinity College to have that designation. We are going to be bringing a lot of European partners now in the next year or two. From then on, we're going to have a lot of those students and staff coming. So we're going to need more, I suppose, presence and more facilities for them to be supported. And we see a kind of a spread out campus. A campus doesn't have to be a single thing. A campus is, you know, very much like you'd see in Cork or you'd see in Dublin. It is a particular, say, facility or faculty can be based in a particular area that's relevant. So, for example, I'm not saying this is happening, but I'm just using as an example that the business faculty in a business quarter makes a lot of sense. So I suppose, yes, we are looking at it. I'm not saying the barracks is a particular spot, obviously, you know, but the answer is we want to integrate ourselves an awful lot more into the actual development of the town, actively engage with it.
Thank you, Michelle. Anya?
That should be a great place for accommodation in regards for students and stuff, but we're kind of in a catch-22 really with the college, because the college don't have any borrowing framework capacity to actually get accommodation. So, and then private investors as well, they're at the mercy. You don't know how much they're going to charge. So I do think that the council, if they kind of do engage with the college or even outside agencies in regards to building accommodation, because the need is there. We can't keep taking in students or even staff and people from Europe, because we don't have the provision there to actually give them somewhere to live. So yeah, of course, it'd be a lovely place for students to live, but yeah, I think in general that we can integrate into the town. I do know that we used to have a campus near the Radisson many moons ago. So yeah, I definitely think there's opportunity to move more into the city centre or the town centre.
Thank you. Alan, one of the questions that arises from our attendees is that in the past there have been many changes planned for the area, some of which have been mentioned, but were opposed by local businesses and residents. In order to make some of these changes that have been suggested by the panel, how do we propose to influence or persuade local businesses and residents to come on board? And to extend that, there's been a couple of references to maybe think tanks progressing this webinar in some way. Has the Chamber a vision as to how it can engage the public further in developing the West Side in conjunction with the local authority?
Yeah, so I think at this juncture, we're very much. It's almost as if we've got a blank canvas in front of us. I mean, when we look at the current study that's been undertaken, the regeneration framework plan that's currently being undertaken by 30 consultants and in conjunction with Westmeath County Council, and Athlone Chamber we will play our part in terms of bringing the business community as a unit to look and examine the plans that are being put in place. And influencing them. And we know from our ongoing consultations with Westmeath County Council, with whom we discuss plans on a regular basis, that there will be opportunities for the public to have their say. And if we do look back, I mean, of course, objections will be made from time to time in relation to specific plans that might be brought forward, but that's part of the planning process, and it's a natural part of it. Objections don't always, some objections are upheld, others are rejected because there is a wider good, there is a bigger picture to be considered. And as a Chamber of Commerce, we take a very pragmatic but progressive approach in terms of driving now this agenda forward. Tyke, if I may also mention, there I suppose there's a property there as well in this area that we're discussing that hasn't been mentioned is the Dean Crowe Theatre. Dean Crowe Theatre provides another kind of a family-oriented and social-oriented property that stimulates a lot of activity in this area, Bastion Street and so on. I mean, you just go there any Saturday morning and the place is buzzing with young children and families where children are learning and progressing. It's also home to the RT Ireland Drama Festival. So, the idea of Connaught Street developing as a cultural quarter where festivals can be nurtured and developed, I think is something worth considering. One further point I might add as well is sport. Sport is becoming outdoor sports is becoming something that families are demanding new facilities on all the time. We have some really good sporting facilities in Athlone, but I think it needs to be considered in the context of the canal and other areas around Connaught Street in terms of, again, supporting both students, young families and so on to grow up in a sporting culture and one that encourages health and good health and vibrancy. So there are just some additional points, Tyke, I might just add on there to that, answering that question, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Alan. Catalyst, I might come to you in relation to the issue of public engagement. Could you outline to us the current work being undertaken by Turley Associates and how the public can become engaged in that? There's a framework plan being developed for the town in general, but specifically the west side of Athlone. And also, I think it's important if the public are being engaged and asked to input into that process, that people understand what the vision, what the proposal is. And albeit I know that the whole purpose of the framework is to devise a proposal, I would like to just outline to our audience that the application for funding under the Urban Regeneration and Development Fund, which Westmeath County Council submitted and which they were granted funding for, I think up to $750,000 possibly. I'm open to correction on that. It refers to the rediscovering Market Square, reverting to its original design intention as a pedestrianised space. Also active land management in Connaught Street, repurposing of the area as a creative and cultural cluster, harnessing creative entrepreneurship, offering bespoke, affordable artist studios and centres, and artisan niche retail spaces. So that's the sort of overview that Westmeath County Council submitted to the department in securing funding. So my question again is just how the public can get engaged in that process, and maybe to talk us through how that process is working.
Thanks, Tig. Yeah, I briefly alluded to it earlier on that Turley are doing work for us in preparation, I suppose, in anticipation of further funding calls. So identifying through this strategy areas that have the potential for redevelopment, such as Market Square that I mentioned earlier, such as the amenity proposals, the linking up through Connaught Street, and as Alan alluded to there, the tying into the canal and the Shannon, and in terms of those activities. And through that process, we hope to identify a pipeline of projects. I spoke about the incremental development and regeneration of the area. So again, looking to, for this specific area, it's looking to build on that growing cultural and tourism profile. So that's where the focus is from our perspective, bringing back life, reimagining the area, improving the architecture, accessibility, in terms of accessibility for everyone in the area, to amenities and to services. And a lot of that will be done through that public realm from our perspective, and then encourage and identifying areas for further development from the investor and the developer's perspective. Again, there's going to be that focus that Alan talked about there, about entertainment, the potential in the area for festivals, arts and crafts. And then obviously other gatherings and events. I think we highlighted earlier the potential of the Shannon, for gatherings based on the Shannon, maybe fun fairs around the water, new civic amenity spaces, and we did have a waterfront strategy there. There's also potential for investment, in housing, and there's you can see there's an application in on Connaught Street at the moment for a small apartment and retail development. So that's a positive, a positive turn for the area, to see that activity and interest coming back there.
Alice, if I may just to ask you, you mentioned it just there in passing, there's a question about the waterfront strategy, and just as you mentioned, it's appropriate to throw it at you. What has happened to the idea of a large recreational area around the Golden Mile walk from the waterfront strategy developed in 2011? I know that strategy is still extant, so to speak, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And look, we've implemented many aspects of the Waterfront strategy, and again, piece by piece, and we're reviewing that strategy at the moment. And I've spoke about the importance of the amenities and tying it back into the area. So there's no immediate plans for that area, but again, this is what we're doing. We're taking stock, and we're going to evaluate everything in that regard. And I suppose just to say, you did ask about the public consultation. We're probably 1/3 of the way through the review at this time. So getting our own understanding of the area, the needs, evaluation, looking at what branding is in place existing for Athlone, and what we feel needs to be could be improved on, or I suppose having our own idea of where we could go with it. So at the end of February, so in just about a month's time, we will be going out to public consultation on that, on what the issues that we have unearthed and the concepts that we have developed, and we'll be looking for the public's engagement to get their views for the area. So that'll be the first step in the process. And if you follow the council's website or our social media channels, we'll be publicising that broadly. And again, obviously, from that, we'll develop up proposals and engage with the public again. And then later on in the year, we're looking at one specific aspect of the town under this strategy. Later on in the year, we'll be preparing an urban area plan, and we welcome that joint approach with Roscommon County Council, given the proximity to Monksland and the relationship between the area. So we'll be preparing an issues paper for a more strategic overview of the town. That'll give people another chance to input into that. That'll be at the end of the summer, and then as we develop up the local area plan itself and we have our detailed policy, it'll go through a formal public consultation process. So there's going to be that there'll be a lot of engagement with the public in terms of our strategies for the area and proposals for the area, and then obviously the projects that we're doing go through, you know, public consultation as well. So any specific works in, for example, on Market Street goes through its own consultation process under the Part 8 provisions. And I suppose if people maybe not familiar with some of our projects and how to engage, we have a new public consultation portal on our website. So it's a Westmeath public consultation portal, and you can see all projects or proposals, strategies that are currently open to public consultation. But you can also go in and you can look at previous proposals that we've brought through in the last number of years, and you can look at the various stages of those and the inputs, how the public submissions and consultations were taken on board, and then what came out of that, the outputs as well. So that it's a useful reference point for people who have an interest in this area.
One or two further questions for Catalyst that relate to the council that I might just wrap up here now. There was one prior to the seminar that came in advance, which is if there are any plans to pedestrianise Connaught Street, and a similar traffic related question relates to the fact that Connaught Street suffers hugely from a lack of traffic management. At all times of the day, you can see large lorries blasting through the street. Granted, they are necessary for deliveries, but even if they were time restricted. So just a couple of issues there in relation to transport through those west side streets that we're talking about.
So at the moment, there's no plans for any of these things. What we're doing at the moment to inform our strategies is we're doing a local transport plan. So that's gathering all the evidence. We're working jointly with Roscommon County Council, and we're looking at these issues. We're looking at how the town functions, access infrastructure, and what needs to be put in place to accommodate further development. We've also got an active travel team in place in the council, and they're looking at, you know, that mobility management, how we can increase cycle and pedestrian movement throughout the town. And they're doing an evaluation of all the strategic routes into Athlone, and they'll be looking at putting forward projects, you know, to enhance these routes from a pedestrian and cycle connectivity perspective. And I suppose that's an important element there. For example, when we look at the west side, for example, as a location for that student accommodation, for example, how can you move across the town in an easy manner and make this area attractive as a destination for both people living there and also that transient population that we see as students and people come in to enjoy the area for maybe shorter periods. So based on the outcome of that transport study, it will inform future plans for the area in terms of traffic management and all these issues. But again, it's a matter of gathering the evidence, and we're engaging, I suppose, with the NTAs and their transport models that they've already prepared for Athlone. But it's an issue that we're acutely aware of and that we're addressing. But I suppose, in short, no, there's no specific plans in place for any of this until we gather out the information and then, I suppose, look at it from a strategic perspective.
Thank you, Catalyst. Michelle, one of the issues that you have some views on is the importance of supporting whatever distinct quarter we feel is necessary for the west side, particularly through issues like rural transport, commuter supports, park and ride, and so forth. There are a number of questions that relate to that. Issues that I'd like to just mention. One contributor mentions that Athlone is about 8 kilometres from one side of the town to the other. Pedestrianisation relies on getting people to come into town, and public transport is insufficient currently. What plans are in place to improve sustainable methods of transport to provide a viable alternative to the car? There's another question that just refers to the possibility of a pedestrian walkway in the footprint of the old bridge of Athlone. For those who may not be familiar, that would be the bridge would have extended from the back of the brewery that was mentioned previously, the microbrewery there at the centre across to Main Street. So just a couple of questions there about sustainable transport and how that can help to sustain a development.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's European funding that's available now for urbanization. It's not just the national funding. There's European funding that we can tap into. Okay, there's already examples of how you can connect your recreational tourism with the actual transport issues. So for example, water taxis, all right, we have a huge length of the Shannon there. The shortest distance, believe it or not, is, you know, across the river, and we've only so many bridges. So an easy and very economic way would be using something like water taxis in better times. The Shannon is not that rough at the best of times unless the weather is very bad. So, you know, there's some industry and little industries there that can really look at easing that type of commuting. Now, the bigger questions obviously are looking at the park and ride system, and there is plenty of space on the outer ring, for want of a better word, of Athlone that can be looked at, and that I believe are being looked at in provisionally to see how can we better design the system. But before you put more ring roads and large scale car parks with buses or even trams, because, you know, Anya is right, the European cities now all are looking at electrical trams and electrical small computer buses, which is what we really need to do, all right, is look at that and again apply for the funding to Europe for that. That's how we're going to address this problem, okay? And as I said, the biggest thing though is that to ensure that when we get there, that you're centralizing the activity. So again, that 8 kilometers is a long stretch. You have to centralize, and that's what the district idea comes from, because then you can target how that district is being supported from a transport plan perspective.
Thank you, Michelle. We're starting to get towards the conclusion of our webinar. There are a number of questions here that I would like to just tie up as well. Catalis very briefly might just give very short responses to these particular questions. What will be included in the plans for the needs of children where play is concerned? And also a question regarding deadlines for any plans that emerge from the framework proposal by Daly.
Thanks, Tig. I suppose just before I move on, in terms of building on that point of accessibility and movement across the town, making it easier to access our attractions, and that maybe just to inform people that we're under Fáilte Ireland initiative, we're working on a wayfinding strategy for tourists and visitors to the town. So that will look at how people move across the town and how they can better you know, come from area to area and get to our attractions and make it more accessible. In terms of our framework plans, the deadlines for and our, so could you just repeat that? Is it that we asking what plans?
The question relates to how can we ensure deadlines are met for any proposals in the framework document that emerges.
Okay, well, I suppose to give a context for people, our framework plans and our strategies to provide an overarching policy, you know, within which development occurs. So they're not the same as I suppose a project plan where you set out a task and you're going to deliver it. So they set out the uses at a high level of what is acceptable, and then you assess development within those. So they're a strategic, you know, they're a longer term document. There may be initiatives within them that we as the council can pursue under, but it's not a pipeline of projects that has deadlines on it. It's a framework which sets out appropriate uses and a vision for the area, and then it sets out the policy context for future development and how we assess that development.
Okay, thank you. Before we conclude, I would like to ask each of our participants to outline one concrete proposal that they would like to see come to fruition on these west side of town. And again, you can keep it brief. I just like a tangible, concrete proposal. I might start with you, Anya.
Thanks, Tig. Yes, accommodation. I think universal, social and also purpose-built student accommodation is desperately needed for this side of town and just for the community of Athlone.
Thank you, Anya. Alan?
Yeah, so I see on a comment there from somebody a message about small incremental wins. So I think that is a way, one of our ways to go because people want to see things happen urgently. I'd like to see the plaza opened out there in Market Square. I think that's something that we'd like to see happen fairly soon, particularly with the footbridge happening in the next 12 months or so. we're going to see a lot more footfall. But let's get Market Square opened up, as well as addressing the car parking issue in parallel. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Trasa?
Thanks, Tyke. I suppose the main thing for me would be more incentives for startup businesses on the west side of town. It's been reported in the media that the startup businesses, they remain elevated to, I suppose, pre-pandemic levels. So there's plenty of people with new ideas, new businesses, and we just need to get them into the west side of town.
Thank you. Gerald O'Brien?
Well, I suppose if we look at that, the whole left bank idea came in about 30 years ago and has been a successful branding for a particular area there. And the council's idea of the tourism and culture quarter seems to tie in nicely with that. But I would just remind people that the left bank in Paris was students and artists. And I think Anya is right there. Maybe we should be bringing in students as well as artists and trying to bring more life into the area.
Thank you for that. Michelle?
I think quick wins is the right approach. I think just getting a consensus, having festivals, having just community weekends where you pick something and get people into that region, whether it be, you know, a stall-based market or something like that, I think is a quick win. And then the longer term plan would be the transport.
Thank you. Catalyst, rather than ask you for a personal opinion as a council official, I'd just like to give you the opportunity to make a concluding remark of your own choice.
Thanks, Tig. Yeah, I suppose what I would say is it is important to engage and collaborate, and I suppose the community ownership in the regeneration and reimagining of any area is key. You know, the delivery of a piece of infrastructure on its own is only one piece of the jigsaw, and you know it's very important that, you know, traders, investors, stakeholders, and the community themselves take ownership and are committed to the sustainable redevelopment of the town, because it's you know, it's the people themselves that have the capacity to address and affect challenges in their areas. You know, whether that be through the business areas and addressing vacancy, expanding business type, you know, engaging in the schemes such as shopfront enhancement schemes and other initiatives that are available there, and then even for everybody, you know, that they create and maintain their own attractive streetscape. So that collaborative approach, community ownership, and I suppose a good relationship with ourselves as a local authority, I think is very important to the success of any area.
Thank you, Catalyst. From my own point of view, I probably should have mentioned earlier, I'm a resident of some of the streets, just off the streets that we're referring to today. I would definitely like to see what Trasa mentioned earlier, a more concerted effort to maintain the upkeep of the area, the appearance of the area visually and so forth. I think in terms of the public engagement, one thing that I would like to see emerge from this is something like the Monksland Town Team, maybe a specific multi-agency approach to the west side of Athlone, whereby the local business community, the local voluntary sector, the local residential sector, in conjunction with the local authority, forms a sort of a coordinating committee to push on this area of town. I think that's something that the Chamber of Commerce could equally contribute to, and I think would be a very productive element to add to the mix. But for now, just to remind people that this illuminating conversation, I think you'll all agree was very, very interesting, will be available on the Athlone Chamber of Commerce YouTube site. Once again, to thank our sponsors, Athlone Town Centre, for their generous support for this initiative. To thank Athlone Chamber of Commerce for organising it and asking myself to chair these two seminars. I hope they've been productive, and I hope that the Chamber's intention to develop an issues paper emerging from both of these seminars will come to fruition and will play a part in the Thurley framework, particularly for this side of town. Thanks to all of those who attended and asked questions. We did endeavour to deal with as many questions as possible. Apologies to those that we may have missed out on, but your contribution was greatly appreciated. So once again, thanks to everyone. Thanks to all the panelists for their contributions, and hopefully you'll enjoy watching this back on YouTube. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks,
all the
Darren.
panelists.
Thank you.